Detective, how long did this process take you?
Hours. Like I said, we were only able to get down there on our hands and knees for a couple minutes before we had to have somebody else come relieve us because of the smell.
Detective, what did you observe in State's Exhibit 11E?
This is a close-up of the partial skull that was under the melted green bucket. It was a plat bucket, and you can see the white lettering. There's an L there, but the bucket itself was melted, and all that was stuffed inside, and underneath there was part of the top of the skull, and we also found a jawbone underneath this portion here that isn't depicted in that picture.
Detective, what did you observe in State's Exhibit 11F?
After we removed that mass of flesh, after it broke into clumps and we tried to pick it up and it broke up, and we had to by hand pick everything up and put it onto the tarp. That's what was left. It was the moist soil, and so we dug down a little bit more, found some teeth. But that is after we took the teeth and the flesh, everything out of the hole. That's what was left, was the moist soil. We dug down further to make sure that we had found everything, and there was nothing else after that.
And Detective, what do you observe in State's Exhibit 11G?
This was part of Tylee that was inside of the bucket that had broken up when we tried to move it onto the mat, or onto the tarp. There's bone, charred flesh, rotting flesh. There's part of the top of a skull here. The orbital sockets are there. That's the top of the skull. These are just some of the parts that we had to get out of the ground and placed onto the tarp.
Detective, I believe you testified earlier that on June 10th, you and Detective Ball followed the Fremont County coroner and took these remains to Ada County. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And what did you do with them on June 10th?
June 10th, we dropped them off and left JJ and Tylee with the Ada County coroner in their custody. And we agreed to come back the next morning on June 11th to perform the autopsy.
Okay. And did you do that? Did you go back on June 11th?
We did.
Okay. What was the first thing you did when you got there on June 11th?
Initially, we met with the medical examiner, Dr. Garth Warren. We met in his office. He briefed us with what we were about to go through, kind of walked us through what was going to happen. And at that time, he walked us down a hall. We put on booties on our shoes. We had gloves. We signed in on the whiteboard, everybody that was inside the room. And at that time, Dr. Warren and his team brought out the black body bag that had contained the black plastic bag that we had taken out of the ground that day before.
Okay. What did you observe next?
They cut the seal on the body bag and unzipped the body bag, and it revealed the black plastic bag that had the duct tape. He placed that bag onto the metal table. It still had dirt on it from when we had taken it out of the ground. They took photographs, did whatever they need to do, and they cut down the center of the black plastic bag.
Okay. When they cut down that plastic bag, what did you observe?
I saw a little boy in red pajamas. He had a white plastic bag around his head, several layers of duct tape from his chin to his forehead area. His arms were duct tape with several layers of duct tape. His arms were folded like this across his chest. You guys see that? His feet were also duct taped and bound. He had a white and blue child's blanket placed on top of him.
Okay. What did you observe happen next?
Dr. Warren cut open the bag that was wrapped over JJ's head. Exposing what was underneath. And underneath that white plastic bag, there was another layer of duct tape across his mouth from jawline to jawline.
Okay. And then what happened?
He then cut the duct tape away from his arms to expose his wrists and his forearms. And when he did that, there was also another level of duct tape wrapped around his wrists. So his wrists were bound this way. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you remain for the entirety of J.J. Vallow's autopsy?
I did.
Once that duct tape was removed, what did you observe?
Through the videos and pictures that we had seen of JJ for the last 8 months, the nonstop looking, the tips coming in, the everything we had obtained and looked at, I was able to recognize that same little boy lying on the table to be J.J. Vallow. He had the same haircut. It was short on the sides, long brown hair on the top. So I recognized him as J.J.
Okay. Was there anything else that was that stood out to you during that autopsy?
His pajamas were soaked with body decomposition. He still had on his pull-up nighttime diaper. There was some visible bruising on his arms that the medical examiner had pointed out to us. That's all.
Okay.
Can you get her a tissue? Oh, sorry.
Detective, upon the completion of the autopsy of J.J. Vallow, what did you do?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah. Upon the completion of J.J. Vallow's autopsy, what did you do next?
Dr. Warren brought in the second set of remains of Tylee. He undid the body bag. Once he saw what was inside the body bag, he had advised us that there wasn't anything he was going to do that evening, that we can come back the next day. And so at that point, we left the coroner's office.
Okay. One moment, Your Honor. Your Honor, I'd ask that the witness be handed States Exhibit 12A through 12E.
A and B?
A through E.
A through E, thank you.
And Detective, if you'll look at those and let me know when you've had a chance to review them.
Okay.
Detective, do you recognize those exhibits?
Yes, I do.
What do they purport to be?
J.J. Vallow, in the condition that we first saw him after they cut open the black plastic bag.
So are these photos from the autopsy?
They are.
Okay. And you were there the entirety of the autopsy?
Yes, sir.
And you saw it with your own eyes?
Correct.
Are those exhibits, exhibits 12A through E, true and accurate representations of what you witnessed that day?
Yes.
Your Honor, the state moves for admission of exhibits 12A through E.
All right, is there any objection to states A through E, Exhibit 12?
No, Your Honor.
All right, states Exhibit 12A, 12B, 12C, 12D, and 12E are all admitted into evidence and may be published.
Detective, what did you observe in State's Exhibit 12A?
This is the first time we saw JJ once they cut down the black plastic bag that revealed what was inside. That's JJ with the white plastic on his head. You can see where we originally cut the plastic when he was in the ground to reveal his brown hair. But the amount of duct tape over his face, over his arms, the body decomposition is kind of what caught our attention.
Okay. Is that the blanket? Is the blanket you referred to earlier in that picture?
Yes, that's the blue and white child's blanket that was placed on top of him.
Okay. Detective, what did you observe in State's Exhibit 12B?
That's the legs of JJ. He's still wearing the Skechers socks. Still has on the red pajama pants. and his ankles are also bound with duct tape.
Were you able to observe any decomposition fluid in that area of that's shown in that picture?
Yes, it's hard to see in the picture, but the whole bottom half of his red pajamas were soaked with body decomposition.
Thank you. Detective, what did you observe in State's Exhibit 12C?
This is after the medical examiner first cut down the white plastic bag. Like I testified earlier, he had a strip of duct tape around his mouth from jawline to jawline. As you can see, his skin's going through various stages of decomposition. But he was still recognizable with the brown hair and facial features that we had seen in the photographs for the last 8 months.
Detective, what did you observe in State's Exhibit 12D?
That's the white plastic bag that was placed over JJ's head. It appeared to be the waffle style type expandable trash bag that people normally put in their kitchen. It had a red drawstring. But that's what was over his head. And what you're looking at, there's pieces of duct tape that were attached to that. And this is just body decomposition that was inside the plastic bag from his face.
And what did you observe in State's Exhibit 12E?
That's a picture of JJ, still with the duct tape around his mouth, just a close-up picture. Like I testified earlier, you could still see the long brown hair, the shape of his head. It was very easily to identify that little boy on the table as the one we had been looking for the last 8 months.
Detective, did you do, after the autopsy of JJ, did you do anything else in Ada County in regards to his remains?
I assisted Lieutenant Ron Ball with transporting various items from the autopsy to the Idaho State Lab the next day on June 12th.
Okay. Did you do anything further with any of the remains of Tylee Ryan in Ada County?
No.
Okay. Just one moment, Your Honor. Your Honor, the state has no further questions for Detective Hermosillo at this time. Due to the nature of this case, we may need to recall him at other times due to the nature of the investigation. But for purposes of today, we have no further questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wood. I'll allow for cross-examination. I realize we took a long lunch break. However, given the evidence just published, I think it would be appropriate to allow another break for the jurors just to clear the air for a moment, and then we'll allow for some cross-examination. So we'll try to make this a quick break. I say that 15 minutes. Hopefully we'll be back on for cross-examination. We'll be in recess for the jury.
All right, please.
Thank you. Please be seated. Can you just hold on just a second? Officer Vallow, can I just stop you? Okay. Yes, thank you.
All right, please. Please press the camera for you, Honor.
All right, thank you. Please be seated. Back on the record, case CR 22-21-1624, State versus Lori Vallow. We took a mid-afternoon break. Detective Hermosillo, you are still under oath, I'll remind you. At this time, the defense may be allowed cross-examination. Mr. Thomas, you can inquire.
Your Honor.
How you doing today? It's been a tough day,
It's been a tough day.
a long day. So I'm just going to ask a few follow-up questions. I know that the state's had you on all day, and we're hopefully going to get this done. So you indicate that you've been a detective for about 4 years now.
That's correct.
So you were in the detective division for about a year when this came down.
Under a year.
Under a year. Okay. And so you indicate the first opportunity you had to get involved in this case, I believe, was on November the 1st. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that's when you were contacted by Gilbert PD, right?
No, sir. I was contacted by Fremont County on November 1st.
Oh, Fremont County. When were you contacted by Gilbert? What were you? Let's just start there. What happened with Fremont County? Why were you contacted by them?
They advised me that there was a Jeep in our jurisdiction, possibly, that was involved with the attempted homicide of Brandon Boudreaux. After Fremont called me, I then contacted Gilbert to get more information.
Okay, so that's where it came. Okay, so you were first contacted by Fremont, and then you got in touch with Gilbert, Arizona. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, all right. And was that also on November the 1st? Did all that happen like in a series of hours or something like that?
Correct.
Okay. And then they asked you to seize a Jeep, a gray Jeep, and you indicated that you were having some intermittent surveillance, right?
Correct.
All right. So tell me a little bit about the intermittent surveillance. How intermittent, I guess, is what I want to know.
Throughout November 1st into, I'd say starting November 1st, it was probably 15 hours worth of surveillance off and on.
And I guess I'm asking, how over the course of how many days?
Over the course of 2 weeks, probably.
Okay. And then did you ultimately find the vehicle during that 2-week period?
I found it on the 4th of November.
Okay. And so your 15 hours of intermittent surveillance on Chad and Lori, that was between November 1st and about November 15th. Is that right?
Yeah, roughly.
Okay. And when you say intermittent surveillance, like what would you do? Is it kind of like a stakeout type thing, or was it different? Were you just driving around? How'd that work out?
Yeah, we parked in front of the residence when we didn't have other things going on. Took a couple photographs if we could, but basically we were there to give any intel to Gilbert Police in reference to that.
Okay. And as far as the surveillance and intel, was that done at I'm assuming it was in Rexburg because you're a Rexburg detective, right?
Correct.
So you weren't going to Chad's house. You were mostly staying at Lori's house when you were doing that surveillance?
Correct.
Okay. And about how many times did you end up seeing Chad and Lori at that particular apartment during that 15 days?
We saw them there the very first day, November 1st, and I don't recall seeing them after that.
Okay. When you say about 15 hours over about 15 days, was it about an hour a day, or was it more different chunks, different times?
Probably different chunks, different times, depending on what was going on.
All right, thanks. That's very helpful. You indicate that the first time that you heard of JJ was when you seized. No, this was a little bit confusing for me. You said the first time that you had heard of JJ was when the Jeep was seized on November the 4th, but then you said on November the 18th, I think was when you said the first time you heard about JJ. Is that right?
The first time we heard of JJ was November 18th, when Gilbert Police came up to seize the infotainment center from the Jeep that we had originally seized on the 4th.
Okay. And help me understand, I'm not a car guy, so what is an infotainment center?
It's has the GPS locations, the middle portion of the inside of the Jeep where the radio,
Okay.
where you can program your maps. They took that. Gilbert Police took that, seized that, and that's the first time that we had heard of JJ.
Okay. So I hate to use this term, is it kind of like the black box of the Jeep now, or is that something that's still like under the seat type thing? Do you know?
I can't answer that.
You don't know? Okay. All right. But at any rate, they took the infotainment center, right?
Correct.
Okay. Didn't take anything else out of the Jeep, or?
Not that I can recall, no.
Okay. And they didn't take the Jeep itself?
No, sir.
Okay. When you, on November the 26th, you went to 565 Pioneer Road and talked to Alex Cox and Chad Daybell while they were standing outside of the garage, I believe, at 175. Is that right?
Correct.
You indicated, well, I don't know if you did indicate or not. Were you wearing a body cam when you were talking to them?
No, sir.
So who else was with you when you were talking to them?
Detective Hope?
And was Detective Hope wearing a body cam?
No, sir.
Were either of you wearing some type of audio recording device?
No, sir.
Okay. So whatever was said, that would have been from your recollection, not from anything that you've reviewed, like a video or an audio.
That's correct.
Okay. So, and the reason that you were at Lori's apartment was for a welfare check on JJ, is that right?
On the 26th?
Yes, I'm sorry, on the 26th of November 2019.
Yes, that's correct.
All right. And you indicated that you called Lieutenant Ron Ball, who is kind of over you, is that right?
That's right.
All right. And so you thought there was some suspicious activity with regards to your conversation, and then you decided to get a warrant. So what was the basis of getting the warrant?
The basis of the warrant was the actions of Mr. Daybell, Mr. Cox on the 26th, the fact that we were advised that JJ was with a family friend who later determined that JJ was never with her. That was a lie. Based on...
Well, hold on. I apologize for breaking in. But when you said based on the family friend, that didn't happen when you went to go get the warrant, right? That happened later, right?
No, sir, that happened the 26th. That night, we were able to confirm that JJ was not with Melanie Gibb, and that was not the case.
Okay. So, and after that conversation, that was when you were going to go to the prosecutor's office and get the warrant?
After the conversation that
With Melanie Gibb?
Ron Ball and Dave Stubbs had with Lori Vallow, where she told those detectives that JJ was at a movie with Melanie Gibb at Frozen 2.
Yes.
Once we were able to talk to Melanie Gibb says that is not true, that was a lie. That was not the case. The next morning, we obtained the search warrant.
Okay. So, but what you testified on direct exam, and I'm not trying to trip you up, I'm just trying to figure out what the sequence of events was. You talked to Chad, he finally gave up Lori's phone number, you called Lieutenant Ball, thought that it was suspicious. Dave Stubbs arrives, they knock on 175, no answer. All those are correct, right?
Correct.
Okay. Then you go and knock on 174, which was Melanie Bedreau's house, is that right?
Correct.
No answer?
Correct.
Okay. And then it says, the next thing I have, and this is probably me, says, go to the prosecutor's office to get a warrant. Is that what happened?
That's correct.
Okay. So this was before anybody called Melanie Gibb and found out that there was, that they weren't at Frozen 2, right?
No, sir.
Okay.
So originally, we went to go get the warrant, and if you remember, I testified that when we were at the prosecutors to get the warrant, Lori Vallow then called Detective Hope back, and she was advised to open her front door. Then Lori spoke with the detectives, and that's where the body cam with Lieutenant Ball and Dave Stubbs come in, where Lori admits that JJ was with a family friend.
But you were already at the prosecutor's office getting the warrant, or attempting to get a warrant, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And what was the basis? What was the crime that was committed that you needed to get a warrant?
We didn't obtain the warrant.
I know, but in order to... Okay. So you just went to the prosecutor's office hoping to get a warrant on a hunch?
It wasn't a hunch. It was based on the lies that we were being told, the concern that we had for JJ at that point.
What was the crime?
Lying to the police about the whereabouts of JJ.
And that's what the warrant was going to be based on?
We didn't get the warrant, sir.
I know you didn't get the warrant, but you said you attempted to get a warrant, or you walked over to get a warrant.
I can't speculate whether the judge would have given us the warrant or not.
Okay. You ended up getting a warrant the next day, is that right?
That's correct.
And you found some guns and some magazines and some other paraphernalia. And when I say paraphernalia, I mean like weaponry, paraphernalia stuff like that. You understand?
Correct.
Did you, at any time during the investigation, was there anything that led you to believe that Lori Vallow or Lori Daybell was involved in having those weapons or owned those weapons?
No, sir.
Okay. And when I say paraphernalia, I mean like the ghillie suit. That didn't look like something that would fit her, right?
I can't answer that.
Okay. You didn't. Okay. You talked a little bit about proof of life, and your definition, according to what I wrote down, and I may be wrong, but what I wrote down was any documentation that would confirm that a person was alive. Is that accurate?
That's accurate.
Okay. Would that be your definition?
That's my definition, yes.
Okay. And so you indicated that the last proof of life that you got for Tylee was on September the 8th. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. Isn't it true that you had hundreds of tips that came in with regards to where Tylee and JJ were in the months after this September the 8th?
That's true. We had hundreds of tips come in after September the 8th, none of which were verified to be Tylee.
Okay. But you didn't vet every tip.
We followed up on every tip.
You followed up on every tip?
Yes, sir.
There was never a time where you said, "Oh wow, we called this number and nobody answered, and so we just never followed up after that one phone call." That never happened.
No, there could have been those times.
Okay.
But we followed up on every tip. That's right.
Okay, but you didn't follow it up to the point where you knew that it wasn't true.
Correct.
Okay. With regards to the death of Tammy Daybell, Tammy Daybell died on October the 19th, 2019, as far as you know, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And do you know where Lori Daybell was on October the 19th? Or I'm sorry, at that time she was Lori Vallow. Do you know where Lori Vallow was on October the 19th, 2019?
I do.
Where was she?
Hawaii.
Okay. So she wasn't anywhere near Tammy Daybell when Tammy Daybell died?
That's correct.
When you searched the property of Chad Daybell on June the 9th, you said you got there around 7 a.m., is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And this wasn't something that was like a spur of the moment thing where you got some guys together and all ran out, got a warrant the day before. I mean, this was something that was planned. I guess what I'm saying is this is something that was planned, correct?
Correct.
For weeks, maybe even months?
I wouldn't go that far, probably weeks maybe.
Okay. I mean, long enough to get a backhoe out there and set some stuff up, right? I mean, there was some planning involved.
Correct.
Okay. And you said you got there around 7 a.m. I believe you kind of alluded to, but I kind of want to nail it down, that the FBI ERT team, the evidence recovery team, they were kind of the ones running point or the ones in charge of the search. Is that right?
Once the scene was secure, yes, they were in charge of the search.
Okay. So how long did it take to secure the scene?
Long enough for us to make contact with Chad and the kids and make sure there were no potential threats inside the residence. So I'm guessing 20 minutes.
Okay. And when you arrived at 7 a.m., there were a bunch of people that arrived at the same time, right? I mean,
No,
you weren't the
no,
lone,
sir.
You were the lone gunman going in?
No, there were three or four of us.
Okay. You and who else?
Myself, Lieutenant Ron Ball, Detective Vince Kai Kamanu, I think maybe Detective, David Stubbs was there. I believe that was it.
Okay. So the four of you. And where did everybody else stage in preparation to go I guess I'm saying there were a bunch of people there, probably 30 or 40 people that were involved in this.
Correct.
Where were they while you guys were securing the scene?
They staged at the church in Sugar-Salem, on the Sugar-Salem Highway.
Okay. About 2 miles away from, just down the road, maybe 2 miles from where Chad Daybell's house is?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You said that you'd only been doing this for less than a year prior to this case coming on. Was this your first time at the scene of a crime like this, where the FBI was in charge and you guys were just kind of worker bees, so to speak? I don't want to discount your job or what you were doing, but I mean, they were kind of the experts and you guys were kind of the ones that were there to help out, right?
I've worked with the FBI, Homeland Security. We've served search warrants on different places when I was in patrol, even as a patrol supervisor.
Oh, okay.
When they would come into our jurisdiction, we would assist them, they would assist us. So it's not the first time I've worked with the FBI or agencies like that. Mm-hmm. To this magnitude, Yes, that was the first time.
Okay. Thank you. That was very helpful. And over the last 22 years of you being involved, you know, you mentioned that you'd done this before. About how many times had you done a search where the FBI was involved and you were kind of helping them out? How many times would you say?
Probably 5 or 6 times.
Okay. Okay. You mentioned in serving the search warrant that there were a bunch of different agencies involved. You mentioned the FBI ERT, or the Evidence Recovery Team, Fremont County Rexburg Police Department, Idaho Attorney General's Office. I want to say I remember reading something about either Boise City Police or Ada County Sheriff's Office, something like that. Do you remember anybody from them?
They weren't there assisting us. They were set up in different locations throughout the highway in case somebody needed to be followed.
Okay. And was that Boise or was that Ada County? Do you remember?
I believe it was Boise.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Their
too, but
surveillance team.
I didn't want to. Okay. And they were part of the surveillance team?
Correct.
Okay. You mentioned the fact that Chad was out of his home in his car, and that you had walked up to him and asked him if he needed a coat or a jacket. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And you said that you thought that it was peculiar, or caught your attention, I guess I should say, that he was looking over his shoulder. And then you said that he was looking in the direction of a tree near the pond area where JJ ended up being found. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. But, I mean, isn't it true that, I mean, that's a pretty wide view. You could be looking at any number of things, right?
He was looking towards the tree pond area.
Okay. But you weren't looking at him to see where his eyes were, right?
I wasn't looking into his eyes. Is that
Right.
what
You
you're
weren't
asking?
looking eye to eye with him.
No, I was not looking eye to eye with him.
Okay. So you don't necessarily know where he was looking.
He was looking towards the pond area under the tree, towards the tree.
Okay. I guess we'll just agree to disagree. So your first task, I believe, by the evidence recovery team was that you were to sift through the fire pit. Were there a number of agents or a number of officers or detectives that were involved in sifting through the fire pit with you, or were you kind of the lone guy on the fire pit area?
No, there were a couple other detectives and also members from the ERT team as well, kind of directing us on what they needed or what to do.
Okay. So in the fire pit area, I saw that there was some pink tape or pink ribbon that was kind of marked out in the area in one of the photographs. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And the fire pit area was specifically marked out as a particular area?
Correct.
How big of an area would you say that was marked out? Because I didn't have any type of a ruler. I wasn't there. I don't know.
Oh, I'd say I couldn't even guess.
Okay.
It was a large area.
Large area. So when they took the photograph of the fire pit and you identified it as the fire pit, it didn't just encompass that one circle of cinder blocks or the wood around it, right? It was a lot more land than that. It was the fire pit area, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so about how long was it between when you went in and originally secured the scene? You said it was about 20 minutes. And then when did you start working on the fire pit?
I'd probably say between 8 and 8:30, maybe.
Okay. And then I have written down here that the pond area, there was a search from about 9 a.m. observed while sifting through the fire pit. Did that happen around 9 a.m.? You were at the fire pit for about half an hour, I guess is what I'm saying?
Roughly, I didn't keep track, but I would say roughly half hour-ish.
And so then a half hour goes by, and then something else is going on at the pond area, and you're taken over there, or you're asked to come over there.
Correct.
Okay. And a number of people stayed at the fire pit area. Is that right?
I can't answer that. I was over at the pond at that point.
Okay. Were you called over by one of the ERTs?
I don't remember who I was called over by.
Somebody.
Somebody.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. Now, State's Exhibit 10A, there was some talk about excavation of the backyard, and that was, I believe in some of the photographs that I've seen, there was actually a backhoe. Is that right? A large piece of equipment? I'm sorry, you have to answer audibly.
Sorry, swallowed wrong.
I'm sorry.
That's correct.
Okay. And this backhoe, were you there when it took the first piece of topsoil off of the ground at the place where JJ was buried?
We didn't use the backhoe where
Oh.
JJ was buried.
Okay. So the first picture that I saw that was published, I don't know the number, but it just had all the grassy part, and then there was a small patch that was not as grassy, right? You
Correct.
understand that picture?
Yes.
Okay. And then the next picture that I saw was a place where they had already taken off that top layer of grass. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so how did that layer of grass get taken off?
With shovels.
Okay. And how deep were you involved in digging that first layer off?
I did not participate in digging the first layer, no.
Did you watch the first layer be taken off?
I did.
Okay. So, I mean, I don't know how it worked out, but did they go in like in a what type of shovel was it? Was it a spade shovel or was it a flat-ended shovel?
I can't remember, sir.
You don't remember. How deep was the first layer? How much was pulled off at first?
Roughly an inch, maybe.
So very little.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
All right, Mr. Thomas, apologies for the interruption.
Oh wow! I didn't even know I was going to go that long.
Well, I don't want to rush your cross-examination. I think there will be more for the detective tomorrow in any regards, so
Okay.
I think it would be a good time for us to adjourn for the day. Before we do that, as I've told the jurors before, and I will continue to tell you again, and I appreciate your attentiveness to this instruction before we break for the day, please do not talk to anyone about this case, including each other. Please don't do any research or look the case up online, or take every effort if you can to please avoid viewing anything about the case in the media that you may run across between now and tomorrow. You'll be asked to sign that juror affirmation again. We appreciate the effort you've put into this case thus far. And with that admonishing instruction in mind, then we'll see you tomorrow to commence again, scheduled to start at 8:30. So if everyone would please rise for the jury, we'll adjourn for the day.
All right, please.
All right, thank you. Please be seated. Council, before we adjourn for the day, I'm going to ask that council remain in. I've got an issue to discuss with the council, which will be in a closed proceeding, so we'll clear the courtroom and turn off the simulcast also to conclude for the day. Before we take that up, is there anything else the state wishes to bring up before we adjourn for the day in the public setting?
Nothing from the state.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wood. Anything further from the defense? All right, thank you. We'll take a brief 5-minute break here to allow the public to clear the courtroom. You can be excused as well, and we'll see you here tomorrow. And we will conduct the hearing that the court determines needs to be closed for reasons I'll state on the record once we call that up.